Yeah, it's me. The first stream didn't work. I had to redo it. Some stupid internet connection. But I'll do it this. So today we're doing scary stories. The first one is gonna be called Ring Once. So yeah, it's gonna be called Ring Once. Okay. I wonder if you guys can survive. I know I can. I've never been good in storms, but I was even worse in hospitals. So when the choice came to visit Nana, my ma's mother, or stay home and brave the thunder and lightning on my own. Only I only hesitated for a moment before making my decision. You sure you don't want to come, Hannah? Ma asked, hovering uncertainty in the doorway leading to the garage. Dad was already out in the car waiting for her. Yeah, I said. I didn't add that this was my attempt facing my fear of thunderstorms head on. I was 13 already. It was time to stop being such a baby. Besides, I'd have Thaddeus, our 5-year-old Laza Opso, with me. Don't know what that is. It wasn't like I would totally be alone. Okay, we have our beepers if you need to reach us. Mom shifted the large photo album in her arms and continued to linger. We'll only be a couple of hours. Behind her, the garage door creaked open and the car started. Dad signaled that he was getting impatient. I'll go with you next time. Tell Nana I said hi. Ma planted another quick kiss on my head and checked just one more time that I was sure I wanted to stay home before finally leaving. I watched my parents pull out of the door from the living room window, trying to ignore the the fat, angry clouds gathering overhead, and once they were out of sight, grabbed Thaddeus and went to my room to read. The storm broke only moments later. The first peal of thunder had my little dog pressed against my side. The second him shivering so hard my whole bed vibrated. I cuddled with him close and whispered soothingly to him, hoping that he didn't notice how I jumped with every rubble or flash of white lightning and tried to distract both of us by reading aloud. It worked for a while. I was so focused on the story that the howling and wind pounding rain became background noise. Thaddeus continued to shake, but between keeping his face buried in my side and, I like to think, the sound of my voice became more intermediate, only occurring when thunder actually rolled. I had thought we could ride out the whole storm together that way. A particularly bright flash of lightning followed the immediate and sharp crack of thunder, however, proved me wrong. I squealed, Dallas whined, and we both bolted from my room, leaving the book face down and forgotten on the bed. I was hungry anyways, I grumbled, trying to save face as we hurried down the steps toward the kitchen. I turned on every light on the way down. It made me feel better, less alone, less Mother Nature. I turned on every light on the way down. It made me feel better, less alone, less mother, less Mother Nature was going to burst through my windows. Thought stuck close to my feet while I went to the pantry, the fridge, and then back again, trying to decide what I wanted to snack on. photos ringing shrilly from. It made me feel better, less alone, less like Mother Nature was going to burst through my windows. Thaddeus stuck close to my feet while I went from pantry to the fridge and then back again, trying to decide what I wanted to snack on. I turned on every light on the way. Oh, I already lost that. The phone ringing shrilly from its place on the wall beside the fridge made my heart skip a beat. It rang once and then went silent. I swallowed hard and looked down at Thaddeus like he was the one who had startled, and said, "It's just a phone. It's okay." He licked his lips and wagged his tail once in response. I knew he just wanted a bite of cheese. There was no big store enough to make him not want cheese. It took it to mean he agreed that we were fine. It had probably just been a misdial or something, and the person had hung up when they realized they made a mistake. I put together a little plate of tortilla chips and cheese, some of which went to Thaddeus and stuck it into the microwave to melt. Once it was done, we took our snack and went to the living room to watch cartoons as high enough to volume to block out the storm. A few minutes after we sat down, the phone in the living room table rang. A little less on edge this time, I reached for it and plucked the receiver from its cradle. Hell, I started to stay, but it was cut off by the dial tone. I frowned and set the phone down again. Maybe the storm was messing with the lines or something, I thought. I remember Dad saying that this could happen when the weather got bad. Nothing to be scared of, I said to Thaddeus. He draped himself across my lap, his eyes fixed on my nachos. I giggled and, bleeding heart that I was, gave him one. When the gust of wind rattled the nearby windows, we huddled closer together and I turned up the TV even more. We, we made it partway through an episode of my show before the phone went off again. This time I only sat up and slightly to look at it. It stayed quiet after that single ring. I tried to dismiss it like I had before, but the line of goosebumps had started to creep up the back of my neck and I rubbed it roughly. Don't be a baby, I repeated myself a few times. It's just the phone. I tried to pay attention to the TV again, but every few seconds I'd find my eyes slipping back to the phone. The next time it rained, about 10 minutes later, the lights overhead flickered. Just once, another single ring, and then silence. Outside, the storm continued to batter the house, and lights dimmed again before coming back on fully. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I suddenly had an urge to use the restroom. I gave Thaddeus a quick pat on the and leapt off the couch to run down the hall to the bathroom. I was in the middle of washing my hands when the lights went out in the bathroom and plunged into total darkness. Ugh. I whimpered and groped around for a towel to dry my hands and then for the handle. There were flashlights in the junk drawer in the kitchen. I knew I just had to make it my way down to them, toward them. My trembling fingers closed on the doorknob and I started to pull it open at the same time. The phone rang. It echoed throughout the dark and quiet one time. I froze, too afraid to move forward. It was dumb. I knew it. It was dumb. But the high pitched thrill of the phone was almost enough to have me bursting in tears. Why did it keep ringing? Who was it? What did it want? It's someone who knows I'm home alone. A panicked voice cried out in my head. Thaddeus whined from the living room. He was alone and scared as I was. I had to get to him. He was the only thing to get me moved again. I bit my lip, bowed my head, and charged down the hall and into the kitchen. The junk drawer was thrown open, and I felt unwelly until I found one of the flashlights that was kept there. I switched it on and followed a thin beam of light into the living room. Lightning lit up the house around me for a second, quickly followed by a deep growl of thunder. I forced back a sob and in a shaky squeak, called for Thaddeus. He wanted to get in, and I shined my flash around the room until I found him. He was sitting in the front of the table, phone was on, staring up at it. As soon as the flashlight hit it, it rang again, just once. Thaddeus? I shouted as if I was afraid that something was going to reach to the phone and grab him. He continued to look up at it, his ears perked forward, and then he whined again. I darted across the room and knelt to pick him up when I heard something. A thump on the front porch right outside the door. My flashlight was on it instantly, just in time for a lock to start turning. The door swung inward and I started to scream. Hannah! Hannah! Calm down. It took me a moment to realize the figures in the doorway, dropping wet and feelers in the shadows, were my parents. They had to come through the front door since there was no power to open the garage. I dropped the flashlight on the floor and Thaddeus and I ran to them and fell into my dad's arms. What is it? What's wrong? He asked, and I looked up at them, ready to tell them all about the storm and the phone, but the words died in the back of my throat. Their eyes were red and puffy, and Mom's face was twisted with an expression only even seen once. After her dad's accident 3 years prior, an ugly, sneaking feeling filled my whole body. For a moment, the strange calls were forgotten. Nana? I dropped the flashlight on the floor and Thaddeus and I ran down and held him to my dad's arms. Oh, I read that. Nana, they had me tightly between them. It was all the answer I needed. She'd been real sick for a long time, baby girl. Dad said to Ma, wouldn't have to. We thought we'd have more time with her, but she suddenly got worse today, and they were much in her. We were with her in the end. That's what matters. I wanted to say something nice to Ma, something that might have helped her feel even a tiny bit better, but my tongue had become thick and clumsy, and I could do was cling to her and cry in the doorway. Behind me, the phone rang once again. I shifted to my surprise and to look up at her and saw that she was staring over my head, right at the phone. It's been doing this for a while. I was now angry at whoever was playing the prank instead of scared. Ma didn't need to be bothered right now. What ringing? Dad asked. He guided Ma to the rest of the way into the kitchen so we weren't standing half the storm and Ma didn't need to be bothered right now. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, just once, Ma whispered in his sleep. How did you know? Ma crossed the dark living room and into the seat at the edge of the couch beside the phone. She never stopped looking at it. After I moved out of my parents' house for the first time, I lived an hour away. I'd visit every other weekend, and each time I left, Mom would ask me to call them to know I made it back to my apartment safely. I did it for a long time. I did it for a long time. Till I met your dad. Ma's voice cracked, and she ran her fingers down the receiver. I let the phone ring just once to let them know all was well. She called back and let my phone ring once too. She said it was, Wait, you got it, thank you, and I love you. Dad sat beside her and put her arms around her shoulders, and she took a deep, shuddering breath. Do you think, do you think it's Nana? I asked. It can't be, honey, Dad said gently. No sooner than had the words left his mouth, the phone rang again, just once, the same single Ma had used for years to let her family know that she was safe. She was home. Ma and Dad exchanged a look. Abby? She rang once again. George, now it's my turn, she said with the ghost of a watery smile. Instead of arguing, Dad took her hand and gave it a squeeze before releasing it so she could dial her mother's phone number for the last time. She held it up to her ear long enough to let it flicker ring once, just long enough to say, Got it, thank you, love you. And then, after she hung up, the phone didn't ring again. Did you guys like that? I want to do one more. Let me know if you guys want to do this live or do you just want to make a video of this. Like you guys can talk to me, say you like it. I could only like make videos, but who knows? Shattered life. I I don't know when you're going to read this, but I can tell you when it started, I was out for a walk alone in the woods when the entity came for me. I was beyond a blur. It was, for lack of a better term, absence of meaning. Where it had, there was no trees. Where it closer, there was no grass. Through the arc, it leapt at me. There was no breeze of motion. There was no air at all. As it struck, I felt the distinct sensation of claws puncture me somewhere unseen, somewhere I never felt before. My hands and arms and legs, torso seemed to be fine, and I wasn't bleeding, but I knew I'd been injured somehow. As I fearfully ran back home, I could tell that I was vaguely tired, and it was hard to focus at times. The solution at that early stage was easy, a big cup of coffee that helped me feel normal again. For a while, that subtle drain on my spirit became lost in the ebb and flow of caffeine in my system. You could say my life began that week, actually, because that was when I met Mar. She and I got along great, though, to be honest, I'm pretty sure I fell in love with her over the phone before we even met. It was almost as if the strong emotions of that first week made the entity fight back. It was still with me, latched onto some invisible part of my being. The first few incidents were minor. I hardly worried about them. The color of neighbor's car changed from dark blue to black one morning. I had stared at it before, shaking my head and shrugging off the difference. 2 days later, a coworker's name changed from Fred to Dan. I carefully asked around, but everyone said his name had always been Dan. I figured I'd just been mistaken. Then, as ridiculous as it sounds, I was peering in my bathroom. Oh, peering in my bathroom at home, and I suddenly found myself on a random street. I was still in my pajamas, pants down, urinating, but now the full view of a dozen people at the bus stop. Horrified, I pulled up my clothes and ran before someone called the cops. I did manage to get home, but the experience forced me to admit that I was still in danger. The entity was going to was doing something to me. I did not understand how to fight it back. Mars showed up that evening, but she had her own key. Hey, I asked her with confusion, how'd you get your key? She just laughed. You're cute. Are you sure you're okay with this? She opened the door and entered a full of ox. I know living together is a big step, especially when we've only been dating 3 months. Living together? I literally just met her the week before. This was my mother had always called me a smart cookie for a reason. I knew when to shut my yap instead of causing sense. I told her everything was fine, then I went straight to my room and began investigating. The things were just as I left them, with no sign of 3 months gap in habitation, but did find something out of the ordinary: the date. I shivered angrily, as if I processed the truth. The entity had eaten 3 months of my life. Okay, I'm gonna cuss. I'm gonna cuss a little bit. Does it matter? What the hell was I facing? What kind of creature would consume pieces of one's soul like that? I missed the most exciting part of my new relationship, and I would never understand any shared stories or in jokes from that period. Something absurdly precious had been taken from me, and I was furious. That fury has helped suppress the entity. I never inebbed alcohol. I drank caffeine Regularly, I checked the date every time I woke up. For 3 years, I managed to live each day of my life without observing nothing more than minor alterations. A social fact here and there, someone's job, how many kids they had, that sort of thing. Later, they laid out nearby streets, the time my favorite television show aired, that kind of thing. Anyways, those changes reminded me of the creature inside called sunk into my spirit. Not once in 3 years did I ever let myself zone out. One day I grew careless. I let myself get really into the session finale of my favorite shows. It was gripping and fantastic story. Right after the height of the action, a young boy came up to my lounger and shook my arm. Surprised at that, who are you? How'd you get in my house? He laughed and smiled brightly. Silly daddy. My heart sank in my chest. I knew immediately what had happened. After a few masked questions, I discovered that he was 2 years old. That was, and then that he was my son. Ooh, that's ooh. La. The angry and heartache filled my chest and nearly unbearable. Not only had I missed the birth of my son, I would never see or how the first years of his life. Mar and I had obviously gotten married and started a family in the time that I'd lost, and I had no idea what joys or pains those years contained. It was snowing outside. Holding my sudden son in my lap, I sat up and watched the flakes fall outside. What kind of life was this going to be if... Ooh, that creeped me out. I thought I heard something. Ooh. The church had no idea what to do. The priest didn't believe me and told me I had a health issue rather than some sort of possession. The doctors didn't have any clue. Nothing showed up on their scans or tests, but they happily took my money in truth for nothing. By the time I ran out of options, I decided to tell Mar. There was no way to know this what looked from her inside. What was I like when I wasn't there? Did I take our son to school? Did I still do my job? Clearly, I did because she seemed to be none the wiser, but I still had a horrible feeling that something must have been messing in her life when I wasn't actually home inside my own head. The night I sat up a nice dinner in preparation, she arrived not by unlocking the front door, by knocking on it. I answered it and found that she was in a nice dress. She was happily surprised by the setting on the table. A fancy dinner for a second date? I knew you were sweet on me. Thank the Lord I knew I had to keep up my mouth shut. If I'd gone on about being married and having a son, she might have run for the hills. Instead, I took her coat and sat down the second date. Though carefully crafted questions, I managed to deduce the truth. This really was our second date. She saw relief and happiness in me, but interpreted that the date jitters. I was just excited to realize that the entirely wasn't necessarily eating whole portions of my life. The symptoms, as I was beginning to understand, were more like consequences of a shattered soul. The creatures had wounded me, broken me into pieces. Perhaps I was to live my life out of order, but at least I would actually get to live it. And so it went on for years. From my perspective, while minor changes in politics or geography would happen daily, major shifts in my mental location only happen every couple months. When I found myself in a new place and time in my life, I just shut up and listen, making sure I get a lay of the land before doing anything, avoid making mistakes. On the furthest flung Lepiad, I met my 6-year-old grandson and asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. He said, writer, and I told him that was a fine idea. Then I was back in month 2 of my relationship with Mar. I had the best night with her in the river. When I say the best, I mean the best, knowing that how special she would become to me. I asked her to move in. I got to live through when I had missed the first go around and came up to understand I was never actually mentally absent. I would always be there. Eventually, when we were moving in her boxes in, she stopped for a moment and said she was marveled at my great love, as if I had known her for a lifetime without ever once doubted that she was the one. That was the first time I truly laughed freely and wholeheartedly since the internet. entity had wounded me. She was right about my love for her, but for exactly the reason she conceived a silly romantic analogy. I had known her my whole life, and I'd come to terms with my situation and found peace with it. It wasn't so bad to have a sneak peeks at all the best parts of my ahead. But of course, I wouldn't be writing this if I hadn't gotten worse. The entity was still with me. It had not wounded me and departed like I would have wanted to leave. The closest I can describe my growling understanding was that the creature was burrowing deeper into my psyche, fracturing it into smaller pieces. Instead of months between major shifts, I began having only weeks. Once I noticed that trend, I feared my ultimate fate would be to jump between times in my life, heartbeat by heartbeat, forever confused, forever lost, only in an instant. Each time I meant I would never be able to speak with anyone else, never be able to hold a conversation, never express or receive love. As the truth depth of that fear came upon me, I sat in an older version of me and watched the snow falling outside. That was the one constant I left. The weather didn't care who I was or what pains I had to face. Nature was always there. The falling snow that always like a little hook that kept me in place. The pure emotional peace it brought was like a panacea on my mental wound. I never yet shifted while watching the pattern of falling white and thinking of the times I'd gone sledding or build a snow for a child. A teenager touched my arm. Grandpa? Eh? I started to get me out of my thoughts, so I was less careful than usual. Who are you? He half grinned as if not sure I was joking, handed me a stack of papers, and said, It's my first attempt at a novel. Would you read it and tell me what you think? Ah, of course, pursuing the dream, being a fraud, I see. He burned bright red, trying to anyway. All right, run off. I'll read this right now. The words were blurry and annoyed. I looked for glasses and probably had. Reading being old and terrible, and I wanted to leap back into my younger year, but not before I read this book. I found my glasses in a sweater pocket and began leafing through. More puttered in and out of my living room, still beautiful, but I had to focus. I did not know how much time would have there. It seemed to me that we had relative over. Was it Christmas? A pair of adults and a couple of kids I didn't recognize talked through the hallway, and I ran. I saw my son, now adult, walk by with his wife, and out the door, our group, this extended family, began sledding outside. Finally, I finished reading the story, and I called out for my grandson. He rushed down the stairs into the living room. How was it? Well, it's terrible, I told him truthfully, but it's terrible for all the right reasons. You're still a young man, so your characters behave like young people, but the structure of the story itself is very solid. I paused. I didn't expect it to turn out to be a horror story. He nodded. It's a reflection of the times. Expectations for the future are dismal, not hopeful like they used to be. You're far too young to be aware of that, I told him. An idea occurred to me. If you're into horror, do you know anything about strange creatures? Sure, I read anything. I love it. Royally, I scanned the entrance to the living room. For a teenager, he took it well. You're serious? Yes. He donned the determined look of ground man accepting a quest. I'll look into it, see what I can find out. You should start writing down everything you experienced, build some data. Maybe we can map your psychic wound. Wow, sounds like a plan. I was surprised that made sense, and I didn't expect it to leave serious person. But how will I get all those notes in one place? Let's come up with somewhere for you to leave them. Then I'll get them. And when can we trace the path you're looking through your own life? See if there's a pattern. For the first time since the situation had gotten worse, I'd felt hope again. How about under the stairs? Nobody ever goes under there. See? Sure. He turned and left the living room. I peered after him. I heard him banging around near the stairs. Finally, he returned with a box. It led to the carpet and opened a revealing a bursting stack of papers. He exclaimed, Holy crap! But of course, being a teenager, he didn't really say crap. That's funny. Finally, he returned. Oh, taken back, I blindly, rapidly forgiving his cussing because of the shock. Did I write those? He looked up with a smile at her. Yeah, or you will. You still have to write them, but put them under the stairs after this. He gazed back at down his papers, then covered the box. You probably shouldn't see what they are. That could get weird. That much I understand. Right. He gulped. There is like 50 boxes in there. They're all filled up like this. Deciphering these will take a very long time. His tone dropped deadly serious, but I will save you, Grandpa, because I don't think anyone else can. Oh, that's sad. Mm. Tears flowed down my cheeks, and I couldn't help myself once I didn't realize how lonely I'd become my shifting person of awareness until I finally had someone who understood. Thank you so much. And then I was young again, and at work, on a random Tuesday, once the sadness and relief faded, anger and determination replaced them. After I finished my work, I grabbed some paper and began writing. While the weeks shifted around me, while those weeks became days and then hours, I wrote every single spare moment about them when I were and I thought I was, but them under the stairs, out of order. My first box was actually the 13th. My last box was the first. Once I had over 50 boxes written from my perspective, and once my shifting became a matter of minutes, I knew it was up to my grandson to take it from there. I put my head down and stopped looking. I couldn't stand the river of changing awareness any longer. Names and places of dates and jobs and colors of people were all wrong and different. I never been older. I sat watching the snowfall. A man at least 30 that I vaguely recognized entered the room. Come on, I think I figured it out. I was so frail that moving was painful. Are you him? Are you my grandson? Yes. He took me to the room filled with the strange equipment that set me in a rubber chair facing a large mirror of twice the height of a man. The pattern finally revealed itself. How long have you worked on this? I asked him, aghast. Tell me you didn't miss your life like I'm missing mine. His expression was both stone cold and fiercely eroded. It'll be worth it. He brought two thin metal rods close to my arm and began, and then nodded at the mirror. Look, the shock is carefully calibrated. The electric zap from the device was startling, but not painful. In the mirror, I saw the rapid arcing light silhouette appear above my head and shoulders. The electricity moved through the creature like it was weaved, briefly revealing the terrible nature of what was happening to me. A bugging leech like a mouth was wrapped around my back of my head, coming down to my eyebrow and touching each ear. It was a slug-like bug right over my shoulders and into my very soul. It was a parasite, and it was feeding on my mind. My now adult grandson held my hand, so I took it as I took it in horror. After a moment, he asked, "When I think it's going to be hot, it's going to hurt very badly. Are you up for this?" Fearful, I asked, "Is Mara here?" His face softened. No, not for a few years now. I could tell from his reaction that what had happened, but I didn't want to be sure. How? We have this conversation a lot. Are you sure you want to know? It never makes you feel better. Tears brimmed in my eyes. Then I don't care if it hurts. If I die, I don't want to stay in the time where she's not alive. He made a sympathetic noise of understanding and then returned to his machine and hooked up several wires, doodles, and other bits of technology to my limbs and forehead. While he did so, he talked. I've worked for 2 decades to figure this out, and I've had a ton of help from other researchers of the occult. This parasite doesn't technically exist in our plane. It's one of the lesser spawns of some weird language, and it feeds off the plexus of mind, soul, and quantum conscious reality. When details like names and colors of objects changed, you weren't going crazy. The web of your existence was merely losing strands of the creature ate its way through you. I didn't fully understand. I looked up in confusion as he placed a circle, a, s- a circlet of electronics like a crown on my head in an exact line with where the creature's parasite mouth had ringed me. What's Ubu? He placed his words and grew He paused and grew pale. I forgot that you wouldn't know. You're lucky, believe me. After a deep breath, he began moving again and placed his fingers near a few stitches. Ready? This was carefully tuned to make sure your nervous system extremely unappetizing to the parasite, but it basically electroshock therapy. I could see it. I could still see Mara smile, even though she was dead. I just been with her months ago. Do it. The click of the switch echoed in my ears, and I almost laughed at how mild the electricity was. It didn't feel like anything, at least at first. Then I saw the meter shaking, my whole body within that image convulsing. Oh no, it did hurt. Nothing had ever been more painful. It was just so excruciating that my mind hadn't been able to immediately process it. As my vision shook, the fire burning in every nerve of my body, I could see the reflection, trembling light silhouette in the parasite on my head as it writhed in agony equal to mine. It had claws, six clawed lizard like limbs under its leech like body. It had cut into me in an attempt to stay latched on. The electricity made my memories flare. Mara's smile was foremost. It lightly brought in front of a warm fire as the snow fell past the window behind her. The edges of that memory began lightening up, and I had realized that my life was one continuous stretch of experience. It was only the awareness of it that had been fragmented by the feasting evil on my back. I never managed to be there for the birth of my son. I jumped around a dozen times, but I never actually lived it. For the first time, I got hold of Mara's hand and to be there for her. No, no, that moment I had shifted seamlessly into holding her hand as she lay in the hospital bed for a very different reason. Not this. God, why? It was so merciless to making me remember this. I broke down in tears as nurses rushed into the room. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to experience it. I'd seen all the good parts. I hadn't wanted the worst parts. The inevitable end that would be only face. It wasn't worth it. It was tainted. All the joy was given back 10,000 fold as pain. The fire in my body and my brain surged in sheer white torture. I had screamed. My scream faded into a surprised shout that the machine had electrocuted chair had faded away. Snow was no longer falling around my life. I was out in the woods, a bright summer day. Oh God! I turned to see the creature approaching me. It was the same absent of meaning, the same blank unreality. It crept forward just like before, but this time it hissed and turned away. I stood astounded at being young again and freed from the parasite. My grandson had actually done it. He'd made me an unappetizing meal. The predator of mind and soul had moved in search of a different snack. I returned in a daze, and while I was sitting there processing all that happened, the phone rang. I looked up and on said, I knew it was. It was Marjorie calling for the first time for some trivial reason. She admitted that 30 years later was made up just to talk to me. All I could see her, all I could see was her lying in that hospital bed dying. It was going to the end of unspeakable pain and loneliness. I would have become an old man, left to sit myself in an empty house, his soulmate gone by long before him. At the end of it all, the only thing that would have left sitting and watching the falling snow. But now, thanks to my grandson, I would also have my memories. It would be a wild ride, no matter how it ended. On a sudden impulse, I picked up the phone and smiled. Hey, who's this? Even though I already knew. Author's note. Together, my grandfather and I set out to write the tale of his life. Unfortunately, his Alzheimer's disease progressed rapidly and we were never able to finish. He's still alive, but I imagine that mentally he's in a better place that the rushing nursing home. I like to think that he's back in his younger days, living life and being happy, because the reality is much colder. It's snowing today. He loves the snow. When I visited him, he didn't recognize me, but he did smile as he sat looking out the window. Oh, dude, he has Alzheimer's? Ooh, I didn't know that. Dang. That was actually sad. Well, I hope you guys like this. Hold on, I'm gonna turn my brightness up. Settings. So you can actually see me. I want to know if you guys want to see this more. go like if you want to see it live or you want to watch it just like a lot, like, you just want to watch it as a video. So I thought this was pretty cool. I like those stories. We could do it again. So as I'll meet you guys in the next video. Bye, Zombie Horde.